Episodes of cartoons being banned is something that can happen to any show, both ones made for kids and ones made for adults, and it tends to only happen in extreme cases. As if there's something, bad in an episode, a lot of the time it's probably just one scene and it can just be edited. However, in extreme cases, the whole episode is the problem and gets just outright banned, and the reasons can range from inappropriate moments in kids shows, to the network receiving terrorist threats, to just completely made up bullshit. Anyway, let's just get into the banned cartoon episodes, starting with Rude Removal, Dexter's Laboratory. This was the only episode on the list that was banned before it even made it to air, despite it being fully finished and ready to go, and this actually made it lost media for a while. The episode was originally produced back in 1997 and intended to be a part of the show's second season, though was pulled for its inappropriate language. The episode's title card features Dexter mooning and Dee Dee putting her middle finger up to the viewer. The episode itself then starts with Dexter finishing working on his rude removal machine, which is a machine that will remove the rudeness from anyone, and he plans to use this on Dee Dee as he believes she is rude. She disagrees, causing them to get into an argument, which leads to a fight that then ends up with them both stuck in the machine. The machine does its thing and removes the rudeness from the two, which ends up splitting the two into two separate pairs, one having all their rudeness and the other now being very well mannered. The rude pair leave the lab to go eat the food prepared by their mother. They swear and are badly behaved as you'd expect, and end up having a food fight, messing up the entire kitchen. Then the well-behaved two come down to the kitchen and see what's happened, where they are blamed for it and made to clean, as obviously their mother has no idea there's now two of them. At the same time, the rude pair go back to the lab to just mess with stuff and generally be destructive. The nice pair then go up after hearing all the commotion and come up with a plan to undo the rude removal by tricking the pair into going back into the machine. After doing this, they are turned back to normal, thus getting rid of the rude two, and then the episode ends. So the reason the episode was banned should be pretty obvious, as in the episode, the rude pair consistently swear, albeit censored, but most people, even kids, can probably fill in the blanks. I think it tastes like. Also, they literally had a middle finger in the title card. In the years following, series creator Genndy Tartakovsky would occasionally screen the episode at some conventions, one time at the 1998 World Animation Celebration, and another time during a lecture at the Rhode Island School of Design on November 15th, 2008. Though outside of this, the episode never surfaced elsewhere. There were rumours of this episode's existence online for many years, with many people dismissing them as fake. And to be fair, it does sound fake, like, oh, there was a banned episode of a kids show where the characters said swear words. That is on the level of like the SpongeBob I Was a Teenage Gary scary deleted scene and stuff. However, in 2010, Fred Siebert, who was the president of Hanna-Barbera Cartoons from 1992 to 1996, which was the studio responsible for producing the series, confirmed the existence of the episode via his Tumblr page with a post that reads, "Last night at my annual visit to Jim Arnoff's senior animation class at SVA in New York, I got a question about a mythical banned episode of Dexter's Laboratory. Since it happened after my time on the series, I called Genndy during the class. Actually, there was one episode that they didn't air. It was called Rude Removal. Dexter made foul-mouthed duplicates of him and Dee Dee. Every time they swore, we bleeped them, but standards didn't like it." On top of this, Craig McCracken, who was an art director and storyboard artist for the show, had replied to a comment on his DeviantArt account asking about the episode, where he also confirms it's real and states that it really was one of the funniest shows we ever made. Following this, Genndy Tartakovsky did a Reddit AMA on September 27th, 2012, where someone asked about the episode, and another user also asked if it would ever find its way online, to which Tartakovsky responded, "It might, it was all finished." This was what led to a spike in interest in the episode, and with this, Adult Swim ended up getting involved, and on December 1st, 2012, they tweeted, "Dexter's Lab fans, is there still interest in seeing the lost unaired episode? Let us know. #Dexter's Rude Removal." The response to this was a resounding yes. It wouldn't be until January 21st when Adult Swim would actually reveal something from the episode, when they tweeted the title card, along with an announcement that they would be releasing the full episode Tuesday afternoon, which was the next day. And then finally, on January 22nd, Adult Swim uploaded the full episode to their website, although a few weeks later, it would be mysteriously removed. However, at this point, the video had already been downloaded and re-uploaded all over the internet, so with this, the episode was found, and you can watch it now on like YouTube and archive.org. Though there is something else I have to mention. This version of the episode was censored.
Yeah, we're gonna go up your lab!
Which began a discussion as to whether or not an uncensored cut exists anywhere. On July 15th, 2017, Craig McCracken would confirm that uncensored audio was at least recorded, when he responded to a tweet and stated, "We recorded it with real curse words and added the beeps later. I don't know if that uncensored audio was ever put to picture. This uncensored version has never been uncovered, however, fans have edited an unofficial uncensored cut using various sound clips."
Yeah, we're gonna go fuck up your lab!
Now, before we continue, I have to tell you that this video is sponsored by Manta Sleep. A lot of you probably like to listen to something whilst you go to sleep. Maybe some of you are even listening to this whilst falling asleep. Well, if so, then the Manta Sleep sound mask is great for you because it has these ultra thin Bluetooth speakers next to your ears that can be easily adjusted. Which is great if you're a side sleeper like me, because sleeping with earbuds in is very uncomfortable. You can easily connect your phone to the mask and listen to whatever you want as you sleep. On top of this, the mask is 100% blackout, which is great if you're trying to sleep when it's bright outside. The mask is also made from premium quality material, and the eye cups are C-shaped, meaning there is zero eye pressure, and they can also be easily adjusted. Now, if you're not bothered about the Bluetooth capabilities, well, they also offer other masks like the Manta Weighted Sleep Mask or the Manta Cool Sleep Mask. Anyway, you can get your very own one at mantasleep.com, link in the description, and you'll get 10% off your order if you use code OscarBurn. Now back to the video.
Midlife Crustacean, SpongeBob SquarePants. Midlife Crustacean is the second segment of the 15th episode of the third season of SpongeBob SquarePants, and originally premiered on January 24th, 2003. The episode starts with Mr. Krabs feeling old after he wakes up, listens to old people music, is told by Pearl he's old, is helped across the street, and is mistaken for an old person by an old person on his way to the Krusty Krab. After he gets there, Patrick comes in to talk with SpongeBob about their big night out, which Mr. Krabs overhears and asks to join them in an attempt to feel young again. Later that night, they pick up Mr. Krabs on their bike and go down to the Wash, which Mr. Krabs believes to be a club, until they go inside, where it is revealed to be a laundromat. Then after the laundromat, the three go to pick up trash from underneath the highway. After many more uncool stops, Mr. Krabs is rather upset at how uncool the night was. Mr. Krabs is about to leave when Patrick brings up that he'll miss the panty raid, and this is the part of the episode that would end up leading to its ban. Mr. Krabs then decides to stay and join them in the panty raid. They then go sneak into someone's house to steal a girl's underwear. Mr. Krabs finally feels young again, and then the light comes on and reveals they were inside Mr. Krabs' mother's house. He is then grounded and sent to his room, and the episode ends. This episode was banned and pulled from reruns in 2021 for the panty raid scene, due to the characters wanting to steal girls' underwear being inappropriate for a show like SpongeBob.
I'm SpongeBob!
The last time it aired on Nickelodeon was August 14th, 2018, with every airing of the episode since only being the first segment, The Great Snail Race. It was last aired on Nicktoons on February 25th, 2021, as part of the 2021 Every SpongeBob Ever event. The episode was once available to stream on Paramount Plus up until March 4th, 2021, when it was removed, which was the same time Paramount Plus actually rebranded from being CBS All Access. This ban has unfortunately also affected its sister episode, The Great Snail Race, in some cases, since they're paired together. This one is also unavailable on Paramount Plus, at least in the UK. I can't speak for other countries. However, places like Amazon still have it just on its own. Now, the episode's not actually completely banned, albeit probably unintentionally, as there are ways to still watch it today legally that are kinda strange, and you can tell it's not really meant to be available. Firstly, in July of 2023, the episode was briefly available to stream via the Paramount Plus Prime Video channel, due to a technical error of some sorts that was quickly fixed shortly after. You can also still buy the episode digitally, but only on YouTube and only by buying the entire season, as it's the only episode you can't just buy on its own. Now, I'm not sure why exactly this is, but my guess would be that they intended to make it unavailable like it is on every other service and accidentally made it season only instead and just forgot. The episode is also still available on the From the Beginning Part 2 collection on iTunes in the US and Canada, and of course it's still on physical media, available to be viewed on the Season 3 DVD and also the Sponge for Hire DVD. Okay, so all the entries up until now have been from shows made for kids, so the reasons for them them being banned are fairly tame. Like, one had censored swearing and the other had a panty raid. Like, if a show like Family Guy or South Park did these, no one would even care, because they have done these and no one did care. But this next entry is from Beavis and Butthead, which is not a kids show. So how does it get an episode banned? Well, ironically, I'm now realizing it's also because of kids, but oh well. Comedians is the first episode of the third season of Beavis and Butthead, and originally premiered back on September 6, 1993. In the episode, Beavis and Butthead end up seeing comedians on TV and realize they'd be able to make lots of money if they also did comedy. So they go to an open mic night at the Laugh Hole, where they tell the jokes they find funny. First up is Butthead, and the only people laughing are themselves. The rest of the audience is silent until they eventually stop booing and Butthead's turn is over. Then next up is Beavis, who also tells the jokes they find funny. The rest of the audience leaves, leaving only Butthead watching. Beavis then says he's going to attempt to juggle and pulls out 2 newspapers that he then lights on fire. The next shot is the 2 standing outside the building as it goes up in flames. And the episode ends. So why was this episode banned? Well, on October 6, 1993, 1 month after the release of the episode, a 5-year-old boy in Moraine, Ohio would set fire to his mother's mobile home using a cigarette lighter. This would end up leading to the death of his 2-year-old sister. Following this incident, the mother would make the claim that her son had seen a Beavis and Butthead episode shortly prior to him burning down the mobile home, in which the characters said fire was fun, and that's what caused it, and this episode was banned because of that. But that's not all that happened. This event also caused the series to be moved from its 7 PM time slot to 10:30 PM, so that it was less likely kids would see it. And also, all the references to fire from previous episodes of the series were cut too, with the actual original master tapes being permanently altered, making recordings of the original cuts quite rare. To this day, this episode has not been released on any DVDs or VHSs, and is not available to stream or purchase anywhere. But it's not hard to find if you do wish to watch it. It's literally on YouTube. Also, many years later, it would be revealed that this story wasn't even true, as in 2008, the boy, who was now 20, came forward and stated, "I literally never saw the cartoon. How could I? It was 1993. My mum was a drug addict, and we lived in a trailer park. We couldn't afford cable. My mum called the news before the fire department." On top of this, at the time the incident had happened, the neighbours had actually said the family did not have cable and wouldn't have been able to see it. So basically, the mother blamed Beavis and Butthead for this, when it had nothing to do with it. But even if the kid did watch it, you probably shouldn't let a 5-year-old watch Beavis and Butthead in the first place. And also, make sure they don't have access to lighters. That's the moral of the story here. Man's best friend, Ren and Stimpy. Man's Best Friend was the second segment of the second episode of the second season of the Ren and Stimpy show that was intended to air on Nickelodeon on August 22nd, 1992. However, Nick pulled the episode before it would make it to air. The episode sees the character George Licker adopt Ren and Stimpy and attempt to train them to be proper pets. Firstly, he attempts to house train the 2. Ren fails this exercise, however Stimpy succeeds and is given a treat, the treat being a dog lawn cigar. Then he attempts to teach them discipline, where he tells them they aren't allowed to sit on the couch. He then asks them to sit on the couch. The 2 are scared to do so, but eventually Stimpy does and is yelled at. However, when he then gets off the couch, he is once again rewarded, whilst Ren is humiliated for being afraid of discipline. And finally, he attempts to teach them to protect their master. In order to teach them how to protect, he teaches them how to attack by wearing a padded suit and getting the 2 to attack him. Since Stimpy was treated so well by George, he refuses to attack him. However, because of how Ren was treated, he uses an oar to violently beat up George. George was actually impressed by what Ren did, and the episode ends with them all having a lawn cigar and dancing. Nickelodeon pulled this episode for a multitude of reasons. One being the violent scene in which Ren beats up George, and another being the presence of cigars in the episode. Following the episode's ban, Nickelodeon would fire John Crickfalusi, the series' creator, and he believed this was done in order to make the show more family friendly. However, Nickelodeon claims he was fired for missing deadlines. This episode would remain banned and wouldn't be publicly available up until the creation of Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, which was an adult version of the series created for Spike TV. This episode would finally be aired as a part of this series on June 23rd, 2003, marking it as found. As of right now, this episode isn't available on Paramount Plus, but can be found online. It's also available to watch on the DVD release of Season 2 and the complete series DVD. Yeah, I already covered this in my Nickelodeon Lost Media Iceberg, so I literally just played that clip. Super Best Friends, Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2, 200 and 201, South Park. Okay, so South Park has more banned episodes than anything else on this list, having a total of 5 which are all banned for the same reason, because they all attempted to depict the Prophet Muhammad, with the only one actually managing to show him being Season 5 Super Best Friends. If you are unaware, generally in the Muslim religion it is forbidden to depict Muhammad as it could lead to idolatry, which is the worship of idols, which is also forbidden in Islam. Anyway, the first of these 5 episodes is Super Best Friends, which is Season 5 Episode 3 and released back on the 4th of July 2001. In the episode, David Blaine, who is a real life magician, starts a cult by performing cool magic in the street, then inviting people to his quote unquote camp for $69.95, which the boys fall victim to. Stan quickly realizes what's going on and leaves. He attempts to convince Kyle to also leave, but he chooses to stay. Stan is then stalked and harassed by the cult, and so goes to find Jesus to tell him what's happening. Jesus then goes to one of Blaine's magic shows in Denver and performs his famous feeding of the 5,000 trick, where he multiplies a bunch of bread and fish, which isn't as cool as what David Blaine does, and ultimately he wins over the crowd. Jesus leaves defeated and realizes he is going to need the help of the Super Best Friends, which is a group comprised of mostly religious figures, being Krishna, Joseph Smith, Lao Tzu, Buddha, Seaman, Moses, and of course Muhammad. It's a parody of the Super Friends. Anyway, this whole time David Blaine has been attempting to pass his cult off as a religion in order to obtain tax-exempt status, which was denied. So to protest this, the Blaintologists are told to commit mass suicide in Washington DC, which is where Kyle finally realizes that the cult is bad. He tells Cartman they should leave, and Cartman, instead of leaving, snitches on Kyle, who is then put in this glass semisphere. The Super Best Friends then find out about the Blaintologist plan and head to Washington, where the Blaintologists have begun to drown themselves in the reflecting pool. They also begin to fill Kyle's semisphere with water. When the Super Best Friends arrive, Blaine brings the statue of Abraham Lincoln to life to fight them. In order to fight back, Moses suggests they create a giant stone John Wilkes Booth, who famously assassinated Abraham Lincoln. They do so and eventually shoot the Abraham Lincoln statue, which stops the Blaintologists and frees Kyle. Finally, David Blaine escapes by flying away in his rocket. Overall, it's a pretty standard South Park episode, and when it was aired, it wasn't actually controversial at all, and there was no major backlash or anything. It wasn't until many years later that it became controversial following the Giles Post and Muhammad cartoons controversy, which to very briefly summarise was a controversy where on September 30th 2005, the Danish newspaper Giles Posten published 12 editorial cartoons which featured depictions of Muhammad. This then led to outrage and violent protests and riots, which ended up killing over 200 people. Following this event, depicting Muhammad became more controversial than it already was. But Super Best Friends wouldn't actually be banned yet. Kinda. It was, but only by the channel Paramount Comedy in the UK, which would later be rebranded to Comedy Central UK. And even then, the episode was still shown on MTV in the UK, so it didn't really matter. Following all this, South Park creators Matt Stone and Trey Parker would reference the event by creating the episodes Cartoon Wars Parts 1 and 2, which released on April 8th and 15th 2006. The first part starts with the entire town freaking out and hiding in the community centre after hearing the news that Family Guy will be airing an episode featuring the Prophet Muhammad. This has caused outrage and protests from Muslims all across the world, and terrorist threats are made. Everyone is fearing for their safety. However, the next day, it is revealed that Fox censored the image of Muhammad, so everyone was okay. The boys watch the episode and are confused as to what was so bad about it. However, Cartman finds it incredibly offensive, which is, very out of character for him. Soon, it is announced that the Family Guy episode was only the first part of a two-parter, and that the second episode will be showing Muhammad uncensored, leading to another terrorist threat, and the town once again freaks out. Cartman decides he is going to travel to the Fox network in order to get the episode pulled. Kyle then has a nightmare in which Ike is killed due to a bombing, and this causes him to join Cartman and travel to the studio with him. Meanwhile, at the town hall, a meeting is taking place where the town decides they should literally bury their heads in sand in order to show that they are not a part of the Family Guy audience and did not watch the episode. Anyway, Cartman reveals to Kyle the real reason he wants the episode pulled. He doesn't really care that the episode offends Muslims, he just wants it pulled because he hates Family Guy. And if one episode gets pulled, it'll be easier to get more and more pulled, until the show is just off the air. Kyle attempts to stop Cartman, but he is unable to catch up to him, and he escapes. Finally, we see President Bush visiting the Fox network to meet with its president and attempt to get him to pull the episode. This is when he reveals something about the Family Guy writing staff to President Bush. The episode then ends with a teaser for part 2, which states, will the cartoon be allowed to appear uncensored? Will Family Guy be destroyed? Will television executives fight for free speech? Or will Comedy Central puss out? This implies they are going to show Muhammad uncensored in the second part. Now, after this episode aired, it actually received praise for its criticisms of
of Family Guy. Apparently, the Simpsons staff sent South Park Studios flowers, and the King of the Hill staff stated they were doing God's work. This led to both the shows being referenced in the second part. Anyway, moving on to part 2. Cartman arrives at Fox Studios and demands to speak with an executive, where he is then made to sit in a waiting area with Bart Simpson, who also hates Family Guy. Meanwhile, Kyle continued to walk and found a diner, where he discovers all the people with their heads buried in sand. He then is approached by this guy with a shotgun, who's a Family Guy fan, and ends up giving him a ride to Fox Studios. Cartman then convinces Bart Simpson to let him handle the situation on his own, and goes in to talk with the executive, pretending to be a Danish boy named Danny Pocket, whose father was killed after depicting Muhammad in a newspaper, an obvious reference to the Giles Poston controversy, as that was a Danish paper. The executives are moved by his story and let him go talk to the Family Guy writing staff to try convince them to pull the episode. This is where it is revealed that the writing staff are actually just manatees who create jokes by picking out 5 idea balls, each containing either a verb, noun, or pop culture reference, which when combined create a joke. It is also revealed that the manatees refuse to work if even one ball is removed, hence why the Muhammad episode cannot be pulled. Anyway, Kyle has arrived at the studio and he sees Bart and asks him where he can find the executive's office. Bart tricks Kyle into going into a maintenance closet and traps him in there, where Cartman then visits him and states he has some idea balls to steal from a manatee tank. He then leaves and steals one of the balls, causing the manatees to stop working. Cartman uses this to then convince the network president to pull the episode. Cartman then leaves happy. However, Kyle shows up after he convinced Bart to release him and is going to find the president. This then leads to a fight between Kyle and Cartman that ends with Bart showing up and knocking Cartman out. Kyle then reaches the president's office and tells him he shouldn't pull the episode. Then Cartman shows up with a gun. Kyle gives a speech that convinces the president to air the episode, and it does air with the Muhammad scene. However, unfortunately, Comedy Central actually censored this scene, instead just showing text that stated, "Comedy Central has refused to broadcast an image of Muhammad on their network." Matt and Trey had insisted the network show Muhammad, however Comedy Central was reluctant to do so and eventually just censored the scene, fearing backlash like what had happened with the Giles Poston controversy. They also made the statement, "In light of recent world events, we feel we made the right decision." The terrorists retaliated after the episode aired by making their own cartoon featuring various Americans and also Jesus crapping on each other, and that was part 2. So following this episode's release, there wasn't actually really any major backlash. It actually seemingly received more backlash for having Jesus shitting at the end, as it aired during the Holy Week for Christians, and it also wasn't banned for a while, with it being released internationally and also being available to stream up until June 24th, 2020, when it was pulled with the series' move to HBO Max. However, even still today, you can purchase this episode digitally from YouTube or Amazon, and also of course watch it on the Season 10 DVD. Now, the next 2 episodes are probably the most controversial ones on this whole list, and the second one only ever aired one time and was never released on any digital storefronts and was only available on physical releases. These episodes being 200 and 201, which are the 200th and 201st episodes of the series. 200 aired April 14th, 2010, and to celebrate it being the 200th episode, it features many different references to things from the show. So if you haven't actually seen the show, you might not understand as much of this, but it should still hopefully make sense. Anyway, the episode starts with the boys on a field trip to a factory where they see Tom Cruise is packing fudge, leading Stan to point out that Tom Cruise is a fudge packer. Fudge packer being a slang term for someone who has gay sex. Tom denies it and says he'll sue the entire town, and he does. He teams up with every celebrity that has ever been made fun of by South Park and creates a class action lawsuit. Stan is then called into the principal's office, where he's told that this lawsuit could lead to the town becoming bankrupt, and Randy takes him to go apologise to Tom Cruise in the hope that he'll stop the lawsuit. Tom Cruise eventually agrees to stop the lawsuit if they can get Muhammad to appear in South Park so he can meet him. This is obviously difficult, as if they get Muhammad, they'd be bombed by Muslim terrorists. There is then a town meeting in which they discuss what to do, where Stan brings up that he has seen Muhammad before, back in the Super Best Friends episode I mentioned earlier. Meanwhile, all the celebrities are confused confused as to why Tom agreed to stop the lawsuit if they can get Mohammed, where he then explains that Mohammed has the power to not be ridiculed, and that if they get him, they can harness that power to also not be made fun of. Anyway, Stan and Kyle then go visit the Hall of the Super Best Friends to hopefully get Mohammed to appear in South Park. It is then explained that it's not as simple as just getting Mohammed to show up anymore, and after much debate about how they could get him, it is agreed they'll get him to appear by putting him in the back of a U-Haul. Back at Tom Cruise's house, he reveals he has a machine that will be able to take Mohammed's power, which works because everyone has goo inside them that is their essence, which can be taken and transferred to someone else using the machine. Oh yeah, also Cartman's here with all the celebrities because they believe his hand is Jennifer Lopez, but in actual fact it is con artist Mitch Connor. This is a callback to a season 7 episode, Fat Butt and Pancake Head, and he goes to talk with him in a closet, where Mitch Connor reveals he wants Mohammed's goo so he can sell it on the Hong Kong black market for $50 million. Back in the town, they've managed to get a U-Haul with Mohammed in the back, but now they have a problem, as they have to get him into Tom Cruise's limo without him being shown. Their solution to this is to put him in a big mascot costume. That way you wouldn't be able to see any part of him. The limo later arrives, but as they are getting ready to put Mohammed in it, they receive a threat saying the town will be bombed if they give Mohammed to the celebrities, and as he gets closer to the limo, it explodes. The threat came from the Gingers, who also want Mohammed's power to not be made fun of. This is a callback to season 9's Ginger Kids. Back to Cartman, who is attempting to ditch Mitch Connor as he's had enough of his plan. He's about to walk away until Mitch Connor brings up his father. Now, back in season 2, it was revealed Cartman's mother is actually a hermaphrodite, meaning she has both male and female genitalia, and thus is both his mother and father. However, Mitch states this is untrue. Meanwhile, the town decides to give in to the Gingers' demands since they're threatening violence. This pisses off the celebrities, so they decide they too need to use violence. But if they got violent, it would ruin all their careers, and so instead they go to find a rebuilt Mecha Streisand, who is Barbra Streisand after she was transformed back in the season 1 episode Mecha Streisand. But she is destroyed back in that episode, hence why she is rebuilt here. Mitch and Cartman go to visit Mr. Garrison to speak with Mr. Hat, who is a puppet Garrison used to use. It is revealed Mitch is an old friend of Mr. Hat, and that on the day Cartman's father revealed, the tests were faked, and that his mother truly isn't his father. The episode then ends with the Gingers wanting to see Mohammed and threatening to bomb South Park if he is not seen. This is a problem, as if they show Mohammed, they'll be bombed, but if they don't, they'll also be bombed. Following this episode's airing, a threat was made on the website of the organization Revolution Muslim, warning the show's creators and stating, "We have to warn Matt and Trey that what they are doing is stupid and they will probably wind up like Theo Van Gogh for airing this show. This is not a threat, but a warning of the reality of what will likely happen to them." Theo Van Gogh was a filmmaker who was killed in 2004 for creating a documentary on the violence against women in some Islamic societies. The post also contained audio clips from a sermon by ex-Al-Qaeda leader Anwar al-Awlaki calling for the assassination of anyone who defamed Mohammed, along with containing details of Sona Parker's mansion in Colorado and the addresses of Comedy Central's headquarters and South Park studios. This post author was a guy named Zachary Adam Chesser, who had also tweeted about Parker and Stone on April 15th, wishing for them to be killed and burned in hell. Following this, many news stations reported on the incident, leading to it gaining a lot of attention. The outcome of these threats was that the second episode, 201, was heavily censored by Comedy Central, not South Park Studios, with Mohammed being censored, and every time Mohammed is mentioned also being censored, and the speech at the end of the episode being censored. In the episode, Mr. Garrison refuses to tell Cartman about his father, and so he goes to find Dr. Mephisto instead. Meanwhile, the Gingers are still demanding to see Mohammed, and so he steps out the costume, only to reveal it was actually Santa Claus inside. Then, Mecha Streisand begins to attack the town, and so the Super Best Friends get on their Super Best Friends power cycles to go stop her. Cartman arrives at Dr. Mephisto's lab and is able to be let in by having Mitch Connor pretend to be a black person needing to use his phone. Meanwhile, Stan, Kenny and Kyle come up with the idea to clone Mohammed, that way they can give him to both the Gingers and the celebrities, and so they too go to Dr. Mephisto's lab. Cartman was just about to be told the truth about his father as they get there, and before they are able to clone Mohammed, the Gingers break in and kidnap him. Meanwhile, the Super Best Friends are still trying to stop Mecha Streisand, and Moses tells them that Barbra Streisand can't resist singing duets with Neil Diamond, and so they get Krishna to take the form of Neil Diamond in order to sing a duet with Barbra Streisand. Jesus builds a stage, Lao Tzu uses mind control to get an audience, and Buddha and Joseph Smith find a band. This plan works, and they are able to stop Barbra Streisand. Anyway, the Gingers have captured the boys and Dr. Mephisto, and agree to share Mohammed made with the celebrities if they share the machine. It is then revealed that Scott Tenorman is the leader of the Gingers, and that he has spent many years in a mental institution after Cartman had gotten both his parents killed and then fed them to him in Chile back in season 5. In the time he was there, he was able to learn a lot about Cartman, and now knows his father's true identity. Scott Tenorman had captured many of the town's residents, and he forces them to tell Cartman the truth about his father, with the truth being that his father was actually the same as Scott Tenorman's father, meaning Cartman had killed his own dad and fed him to his half-brother. Meanwhile, the celebrities have arrived with their machine and are ready to use it. They strap Mohammed and Tom Cruise in and use the machine, and it works, as Tom Cruise is now also censored and unable to be made fun of. There's then an argument over who gets to use the machine next, but before anyone else can use it, the super best friends arrive. Then everyone starts fighting and Seaman jumps on Tom Cruise's back, which leads to Stan stating,
Hey, look, Tom Cruise has semen on his back.
shocking everyone as he made fun of Tom Cruise, who then becomes uncensored. He is confused as to why the machine didn't work, but Kyle explains that, yeah, so when this episode was aired, this entire speech was bleeped out, but because of something I'll get into later, we do actually know what he says. He explains that there was never any goo that made it so you can't make fun of Mohammed, and that the actual reason was because of the magical power of threatening people with violence. The episode then ends with the town preparing to rebuild and Cartman crying, not because he killed his own dad and then fed him to his half-brother, but instead because his dad was ginger, which makes him half ginger. Also, Tom Cruise is upset and wishes he would never be mocked again, and so the boys tell him there's a place he will never be mocked, and offer him a way to get there, with the final shot being Cruise dead on the moon next to Jambu the whale, which is a callback to the episode Free Willsy X. After this episode aired, it was not rebroadcast ever, and was never aired in the UK or Australia. It was not available to watch on the South Park Studios website, where in the past you could watch every episode, with it instead showing a disclaimer that read, "We apologise that South Park Studios cannot stream episode 201 at this time." After we delivered the show, and prior to broadcast, Comedy Central placed numerous additional audio bleeps throughout the episode. We do not have network approval to stream our original version of the show. We will bring you a version of 201 as soon as we can. The episode was also never dubbed in any other languages and not included on any international versions of the season 14 DVD, only being available on the Region 1 release. And even then, 201 is still censored, however 200 is not. And also, after the threats, the previous episode 200 and the original season 5 Super Best Friends were pulled from digital storefronts and the South Park Studios website, though cartoon was remained. Also, following 200 and 201, the entire series was banned in Sri Lanka, not because of the Mohammed stuff, but instead because they showed Buddha snorting cocaine. Now, around 10 days after this episode aired, on May 1st, 2010, a failed car bomb was discovered by the New York City Police Department on West 45th Street near the eastern corner of One Astor Plaza, which is close to the Viacom headquarters, Viacom being the parent company of Comedy Central. However, there was never any concrete link between these two events, and also the suspect who was arrested in connection with the incident had trained for many months prior to the episode's airing. So now, interestingly, even though Comedy Central had censored the episode's audio with many bleeps, the original uncensored version was leaked online by a 4chan user on January 31st, 2014. They had discovered that the uncensored episode existed online on the official website's web server and could be downloaded using RTMP dump. This uncensored version revealed Kyle's ending speech that had originally been censored, which was ironically about the effectiveness of threatening people with violence, and was censored because of threats of violence. This whole speech can be easily found on YouTube, and the uncensored full episode can now be easily found online. Also, interestingly, Mohammed appears uncensored in more episodes of the series which aren't actually banned. Firstly, he can be seen in the background of every episode's intro sequence from season 7 episode 8 to season 11 episode 14, hiding in the crowd here. He is also just in season 6's intro, both in a clip of Super Best Friends and also in the crowd. However, this intro has since been altered to no longer feature him. On top of this, in season 6's Bebe's Boobs Destroy Society, he's seen on a lunchbox with all the other Super Best Friends. This same lunchbox reappeared in season 24's The Pandemic Special. Mr. Skinnylegs Peppa Pig. Alright, so we're immediately going to go straight from the South Park episode, which caused the creators to get threats from Muslim extremists, to the Peppa Pig episode that has a spider in it. So, Mr. Skinnylegs is the 47th episode of the first season of Peppa Pig, and originally premiered back on November 10th, 2004. In the episode, Peppa and George are playing with their dollhouse when Peppa gets mad at George for playing wrong. She asks George to go fill up the teacup in the bathroom, and he goes off to do so. Whilst in the bathroom, he finds a spider and ends up bringing it back to play with in the dollhouse. Peppa gets scared of the spider, so asks Daddy Pig to take it away. He is also scared, so gets Mummy Pig, who is also scared. But in the end, everyone likes the spider and they all have a tea party. How very wholesome. So the message is don't be scared of spiders. Now, why was this banned? Well, for most of the world, this message is true. However, this episode, along with another spider-themed episode, Spiderweb, are actually banned in Australia because they encourage children to play with spiders, and Australia has some pretty crazy spiders you definitely shouldn't play with. So you know what, this ban is like entirely justified. Usually when something is censored, it's 9 times out of 10 a bad thing, but this is completely reasonable actually. When You Wish Upon a Weinstein and Partial Terms of Endearment, Family Guy. So, Family Guy has had 2 banned episodes during its run, being When You Wish Upon a Weinstein and Partial Terms of Endearment. However, When You Wish Upon a Weinstein was later unbanned and can be viewed today. So let's start with that one. When You Wish Upon a Weinstein is the 22nd episode of the 3rd season of Family Guy. At least now, originally wasn't intended to be, but we'll get into that. In it, Peter loses Lois his rainy day fund by buying volcano insurance from a scam artist, and then goes down to the drunken clan. Whilst there, he finds out that both Cleveland and Quagmire have obtained quite a bit of money by hiring a stockbroker and accountant, who both happen to have Jewish sounding names. Peter's takeaway from this isn't that he needs to get a stockbroker or accountant, but rather that he needs a Jewish guy. He then sings the song I Need a Jew, which is a parody of When You Wish Upon a Star. After this, a guy named Max Weinstein appears at his door after his car breaks down outside. Peter ends up chasing him down after he tries to leave and asks him for financial advice. Eventually, Max is able to actually retrieve the money Peter lost. Max joins the Griffins for a dinner and also invites them to a synagogue following this. Peter comes to the conclusion that if Chris converted to Judaism, he would get better grades and be more successful. Peter then takes Chris to Vegas for a bar mitzvah, but Lois finds out and stops the ceremony. This pisses off everyone else in there, and the Griffins escape by getting on a random bus. So, this episode was originally made back in 2000 and was intended to be a part of the 2nd season. It was entirely finished and ready to go, but Fox executives decided not to air the episode as it could be seen as anti-Semitic. Family Guy would later be cancelled back in 2002 due to having low ratings, and shortly after this in 2003, Adult Swim was able to acquire the series' syndication rights for a very low price from Fox due to it being unsuccessful. This is where the episode would finally see the light of day on television, as Adult Swim aired the episode on November 9th, 2003. On top of this, Fox had begun to release DVDs for the series, and the episode was included on the Family Guy Volume 2 release on September 9th, 2003. So it was banned for a couple years, but was eventually released to the public. Fox themselves also actually aired the episode on December 10th, 2004. As of right now, this episode isn't banned anymore and can be watched on Disney+. However, the same cannot be said for the second banned episode, Partial Terms of Endearment. Partial Terms of Endearment is the 21st episode of the 8th season of the show, and was never aired on TV, not even on Adult Swim, at least not in the US, but we'll get into that. So the episode starts with Peter and Lois at Lois's 20th year college reunion. Peter doesn't want to be there and is cautious about Lois running into ex-boyfriends. Just then, she meets Naomi Robinson, who she reveals she had experimented sexually with back in college. Peter's mood changes and he's now very happy. Then, Naomi brings up a proposal she has for Peter and Lois. Peter thinks she's referring to a threesome, which excites him. Then, the day Natalie's coming over, he kicks everyone out of the house in preparation. She arrives with her husband, Dale. Peter now assumes it's an orgy as opposed to a threesome. He's slightly disappointed at this, but he creates various scenarios to make up for it, where he's a pizza delivery guy, a teacher, and a Nazi. The two then reveal the real reason they're there, being that they cannot conceive a child of their own, and they ask Lois to be a surrogate mother for them, meaning she would carry the baby for them. Peter is against this. However, Lois ends up going through with the procedure of having one of Natalie's fertilized eggs implanted in her uterus. Peter then goes through some wacky shenanigans to attempt to cause Lois to have a miscarriage, which doesn't work. Then they hear the news that Dale and Naomi have been killed in a car accident. This now begs the question of what the Griffins should do with the baby. Brian suggests they consider abortion. Peter and Lois then talk to a doctor at the Family Planning Center, and Lois decides to go through with the abortion. As Peter waits for her to go through with it, he runs into an anti-abortion group, who show him an anti-abortion video. This causes Peter to change his mind, and he drags Lois out of the clinic. After some more discussion, they end up having the abortion and the episode ends. So, why was this episode banned? Well, it was originally supposed to air alongside all the other season 8 episodes and was approved by Fox for production. However, after it was finished, Fox decided to not air the episode due to its subject matter. Kevin Riley, president of Fox Entertainment at the time, revealed the reason was because of concerns about finances and advertisers, stating, "It's an extremely fragile subject matter at an extremely fragile economic time. Of all the issues, this is the one that seems to be the most of a hot button, particularly at that moment in time. The economy was really struggling and there were a lot of very tough conversations going on with clients. The advertisers know what they're getting with Family Guy. It's very hard on the Family Guy scale to say this one was more offensive. He said the subject matter was handled well, however, this one felt like it could cause trouble and it was just not worth it." So the episode was never aired in the US. However, it was aired in the UK. The episode premiered on BBC Three in the UK on June 20th, 2010. Interestingly, the BBC is an ad-free network as it's funded through the UK's TV license, meaning it doesn't have to please advertisers. It's like how Netflix is entirely funded by subscriptions, or was. I mean, Netflix now has ads, but that's just an example. Also, Netflix won't send you hundreds of letters trying to get you to buy a subscription or send people to your house even if you don't want one. Anyway, the episode would see a release in the US when it was given its own special DVD release on September 28, 2010, which featured the episode and a bunch of bonus features. For more on that, watch my Family Guy DVD video after this. The episode would also be included on the Season 10 DVD, which isn't actually all Season 10, it's confusing, again watch that video, but not in the US. It was included on the UK version though. As of right now, these physical releases are the only way to legally watch the episode as it's still banned and not available to stream on Disney+. And I thought the episode was quite funny. I thought Peter's wacky shenanigans in this episode were quite funny. It was actually very funny when he thought they were having a threesome and an orgy. That was I found that funny. Look at how happy he looks. The City of New York versus Homer Simpson, The Simpsons. The City of New York vs. Homer Simpson is the first episode of the 9th season of The Simpsons, and originally premiered back on September 21st, 1997. In the episode, Barney is selected to be the designated driver, meaning he cannot drink. He drives everyone home in Homer's car, and then Homer lets him use it to drive himself home, as he stated he would return it the following day. Barney then disappears along with the car for 2 months. When he returns, he states he doesn't remember where the car is. Later, Homer receives a letter from the New York City government informing him that his car is illegally parked in the borough of Manhattan, and that he has 72 hours to collect it before it's thrown in the East River. Homer doesn't want to go to New York and reveals he had a bad experience last time he went. However, the rest of the family wants to go and it's only $9, so they go. After they arrive in New York, it's agreed the rest of the family will go around the city whilst Homer retrieves the car. Homer ends up finding his car parked outside One World Trade Center Plaza, covered in tickets with a clamp on the wheel. Homer is unable to get the clamp off himself, so calls the phone number on it, where he finds out he needs to wait by his car for a parking officer to come remove it at some point between 9 AM and 5 PM. Eventually, after a long time of waiting, Homer needs to piss, and the nearest toilets are at the top observation decks of the towers. He goes into one tower and goes all the way to the top, but unfortunately the toilet is out of order, and so he has to go all the way back down and into the other tower. But whilst he's pissing, the parking officer comes and he misses him. Homer's really pissed now, ends up just taking his car and driving it with the clamp on for a while until he sees a construction worker and takes his jackhammer to get the clamp off, destroying most of the car in the process. He then gets the rest of the family and they leave. So why was this one banned? Well, you probably already guessed, but it was pulled from syndication following the September 11th attacks in 2001. This is because it mostly took place at the Twin Towers, and thus they were heavily featured in the episode, and showing the Twin Towers so soon after the attacks wasn't a great idea, since it would immediately remind people of 9/11, which isn't great, especially for a comedic series like The Simpsons, which could be used as some sort of escape from the real world. In the US, the episode wouldn't start to come back into syndication until around 2006, when it was deemed that enough time had passed since the attacks to show the episode again. Over in the UK, the episode was not re-aired until August 7th, 2005, with the airing having several edits made that removed some shots of the towers. Later, when the episode was aired on Channel 4 on October 7th, 2007, it was edited to remove a joke in which a man in Tower 2 states they stick all the jerks in Tower 1. However, in Canada and Australia, the episode seemingly was kept in syndication as it continued to air regular reruns. As of right now, the episode is entirely unbanned and continues to air in reruns. In fact, as of filming, FXX is going to air it on October 18th at 10 AM, and it's also available to stream on Disney+. Boston and Shake Like Me, Aqua Teen Hunger Force. Our final two banned episodes come from Adult Swim's Aqua Teen Hunger Force, these being Boston and Shake Like Me, the first of which was never even finished or aired, making it the only other entry on the list to never make it to air, and the only entry on the list that was never finished. Boston was intended to be the first episode of the 5th season of the series, and before I tell you what happens in it, I have to cover an event that took place back on January 31st, 2007. So, back in 2005, it was confirmed that an Aqua Teen movie was in the works, which would later become Aqua Teen Hunger Force: movie film for theaters, and the movie was slated to release on April 14th, 2007. As a part of the movie's marketing campaign, Peter Badofsky, who is a Boston area artist, was hired by the marketing organization Interference Inc. to do a promotional project, which would involve placing LED signs featuring depictions of the Moonanites from the show around places in Boston. Badofsky agreed to do this and also enlisted the help of a man named Sean Stevens for the project. Shortly after, Interference sent him 30 LED Moonanite signs, and he was emailed a list of suggested locations to place them. The signs were to be put up discreetly during the night, and they'd be paid $300 each. The first 20 signs were put up in the middle of January 2007. Badofsky and Stevens would put up the signs, and they also had a person named Dana Seaver there to film them doing it. Later that month, on January 29th, 2007, 18 more of the signs were put up, including one on a stanchion that supported an elevated section of Interstate 93 at Sullivan Square in Charlestown. So the devices looked like this, with batteries and wires on them, and one was placed on a stanchion that supported a section of an interstate. What do you think happened? On January 31st, 2007 at 8:05 AM, a person saw this device and thought it was suspicious, and so reported it to a policeman who then contacted the Boston Police Department bomb squad. Soon, many emergency vehicles were at the scene, along with a helicopter circling overhead and news reporters and a big crowd of onlookers. During the preliminary investigation, it was found that this device shared many similarities with improvised explosive devices, and so parts of the public transportation system and the northbound side of Interstate 93 were shut down. The LED sign was destroyed using a small explosive filled with water. Shortly after, they realized it wasn't a bomb, but it wasn't until around 2 to 3 PM that someone actually identified the device as being the Moonanites from Aqua Teen Hunger Force, and police concluded the incident was a publicity stunt. Later that day, Turner Broadcasting System, who own Adult Swim, made a statement on the incident, quote, "We regret that they were mistakenly thought to pose any danger. The packages in question are magnetic lights that pose no danger. They are part of an outdoor marketing campaign in 10 cities in support of Adult Swim's animated television show Aqua Teen Hunger Force. They have been in place for 2 to 3 weeks in Boston, New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, Atlanta, Seattle, Portland, Austin, San Francisco, and Philadelphia. Parent company Turner Broadcasting is in contact with local and federal law enforcement on the exact locations of the billboards. We regret that they were mistakenly thought to pose any danger." The aftermath of this event was that Turner Broadcasting agreed to pay $2 million as a part of a settlement. $1 million of this went to the Boston Police Department, and the other $1 million went to the Department of Homeland Security, which is more than double the movie's budget, by the way. And you know, ironically, as it turns out, this publicity stunt got them a lot of publicity. Anyway, this episode was made in response to this whole situation. In it, Shake is attempting to sell Meatwad online. However, no one is bidding on his auction, and so he decides he needs publicity for his auction, and so they go to Boston, where he puts lights, batteries, and wires on Meatwad and places him under an overpass, referencing the real-world events. They wait for someone to pass for 3 weeks, when the ghost of Paul Revere shows up, who takes them to Benjamin Franklin, who then pays them lots of money for Meatwad. Meatwad is then given a kite, causing him to get repeatedly struck by lightning, because, you know, Benjamin Franklin. This causes people in Baltimore to mistake him for a bomb. They even end up convincing Paul Revere Meatwad is a bomb, and the Aqua Teens are made to leave. Shake then reveals he spent all their money on a big light bright that looks similar to the real Moonanite signs. They plug it in, and Shake reveals it doesn't work as it was meant to blow up. He then covers it in dynamite and takes it over to Carl's house. After Carl opens the door, it blows up, making him unconscious. The Aqua Teens then call a SWAT team, who show up and end up blowing up Carl as they believe him to be a bomb. Shake then comes out with a sandwich, which is also presumed to be a bomb, and so he too is blown up. So, during this episode being produced, the executives were very nervous it would end up causing further controversy, due to its referencing of the event. They made Dave Willis and Matt Malero rewrite this episode several times, and 3 different versions ended up being produced, but ultimately, the decision was made to ban the episode outright, and it was never officially released in any way. However, you can watch an unfinished cut of the episode, which ended up being leaked online on January 31st, 2015. The second banned Aqua Teen episode is Season 6 Episode 2, Shake Like Me, which released back on December 16, 2008 on DVD and premiered on TV on April 5, 2009. In the episode, construction workers are dumping radioactive waste on the house next door to the Aqua Teens. Frylock asks them numerous times to stop, but they don't, and so Shake goes to talk to this guy, who is a now radioactive black man. He ends up pissing him off, and the man bites Shake. This ends up causing Shake to turn black. Since you know he was bitten by a radioactive black man, he is now black, has a chain, an afro, bigger lips, grills, and his straw is significantly longer than it was before. Frylock attempts to make him white again by giving him milk, taking him to watch hockey, taking him to buy expensive organic avocados, and making him swim. None of this works, and he ends up painting him white and leaving him, as he and Meatwad leave. He's left alone with Boxy Brown, a box Meatwad decorated, who convinces him to embrace being black rather than turning back to white. So they go play basketball. However, as he plays, he ends up turning back to white, as Frylock had secretly given him a black scene, and the episode ends. This episode would end up being banned in 2020 due to the racial stereotype featured throughout. It hasn't re-aired since and is not available on HBO Max, and also isn't included on the Aqua Teen Hunger Force The Complete Collection box set, which is especially weird as the episode is available on the original Volume 6 DVD, and this set contains repackaged versions of the releases of the first 8 seasons just with a new label. So it would have taken more effort for them to go in and change this rather than simply just reprinting the existing disc. So yeah, if you want to watch this episode now, buy the original Volume 6 release, or alternatively, you can buy it on Amazon still for some reason, which makes it even more confusing as to why they removed it from the box set. Also, you can buy it on YouTube as well, but strangely, it's only available on YouTube if you buy the entirety of Season 7. Also, the YouTube seasons aren't labeled right, which happens a lot with most shows actually. Anyway, this concludes the 15 banned episodes of cartoons. If you enjoyed, like and subscribe, and also check out Our Stupid School. It's a show I made and I'm in. There's also a new episode out now, so yeah.